Hi, this is Abigail Joy with I Am Marketing, and I have Juan Llanos. And so Juan, tell me about what you do and elaborate on consensus.
All right. Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I work, my title is FinTech and RegTech Lead. That means that we're building a practice for building software solutions on the blockchain for regulatory technology, legal technology, government technology, anything that has to do with risk management. So, and we are an advisory firm. We have an arm that is all focused on enterprise and government. And then we have a product applications, distributed applications area. And then we have an infrastructure for Ethereum. So my focus is mostly on enterprise and product right now.
Okay, great, thank you. How will you reinvent the legal space?
What a broad question, super interesting question. It's interesting that, as I was saying on stage, the regulatory paradigm today, or the legal paradigm in general, is completely incompatible with blockchain technology, right? Because regulations and the law are based on industry, industry specific. They're activity based. So if you have perform an activity as a product, as a service provider, that kind of regulation applies to you. Insurance, banking, all kinds of different sets of regulation. Then it's always enforced through intermediaries, right? There's always a company that the regulation applies to, and the company has to build an infrastructure for compliance. And number 4, it's jurisdiction specific. Yeah. So there's regulation for Europe, regulation for the United States, regulation for each state in the United States, provincial or different political levels. So it's a system that is not prepared for the digital age. So to answer your question about how to redefine it, reinventing, I think the goal should be to think globally.
Yes.
Which also is a bit counterintuitive, because the movements, our political movements we're seeing in the world right now are against globalization. So we have trouble getting people to think globally in terms of what's important to the entire planet, like environment, safety and security. One example, a good example that gives us hope is, for example, the aviation regulations, right? We all want to fly safely. We all want to get on a plane knowing that the pilots went down the checklist, and that we're going to get to our destination in one piece. Yes. So that is an example of a very specific goal, which is the safety of the passenger and also the service providers. We don't want pilots or crew members to die also. So it's about protecting life when flying, and harmonized globally through the international aviation standards. So the same should probably be the approach for any other thing that happens on a global platform like the blockchain.
Yes.
So this is what I think the focus should go to: a supranational global organizations like the Financial Action Task Force for money laundering, the IOSCO, International Organization of Securities Commissions, that build policy and guidelines for the securities industry. So all of these groups that operate on an international level.
Yes, it's very complex, but like you said, we can make it simpler instead of just going, through every country, but at the same time globalize it. So
exactly, the challenge is the coordination and the harmonization of the standards, because that's another piece of truth that people fail to see or ignore, probably voluntarily, is that regulation, apart from playing the primary role of controlling the marketplace or protecting the marketplace, is also a political instrument. Because regulation dictates who is a market player, who is not a market player. It could favor a certain industry over another. It's influenceable via lobbying. So there's a political component to regulation that we should not ignore. So it's very hard to get people to think about these global values with a focus on society when they themselves have an interest in protecting their own bureaucracy and their own power. So these are things that we should be aware of and work openly.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. So what checks and balances would you have on privacy coins regarding money laundering and countering the finances of terrorism?
That's a great question. I have been a compliance officer in the anti-money laundering space for a long time, so that has been very close to what I've done. And there's another example of a clash in policy objectives, right?
Yeah.
We have a set of regulations that are focused on preventing financial crime or choking the criminals where it hurts the most, the financings, their access to the financial system, and the obfuscation of payments, and then the cleanup of the money at the end. That's what money laundering is. And also the financing of illicit activity, whether it's terrorism or other illicit activity, weapons, all that. So that is a very strong policy goal, usually in strong, powerful countries like the United States, like Europe, where there is an incentive to protect the integrity, national security, and the integrity of the financial system, more than anything else, right? But on the other hand, also in highly civilized or evolved societies, there's also the interest of protecting privacy and confidentiality for business reasons, and also because it's a human right. We have the human right to privacy. So, and there's even regulation that is imposed on financial institutions to protect the privacy of financial or financial information or private information. And so, but there's also the truth that privacy and confidentiality are attractive also to criminals.
Yeah.
So there's where the clash is. We need systems for privacy and confidentiality, but those systems themselves can also be abused by criminals or wrongdoers or bad actors.
Definitely.
And that is the clash. And it's a very hard question to ask. It's a very good question to pose. It's a very hard question to answer. But I think it's good that you're asking it. That means that we are thinking about it. And I think there might be a common ground or some trade-off that can be achieved at some point, or some middle ground. For example, I always talk about two things. In law enforcement, there's two mechanisms to protect the system, right? One is strong identity, strong KYC standards, right? When you have a strong hurdle to overcome to sign up to open an account, then you ward off people who don't want to be anonymous, right? If you don't have an identity or if you want to remain anonymous, you don't access typically fully transparent systems, right? You just go to other channels, right? So that's one way to keep criminals out. But once they're in, there's a second obligation, which is the continuous monitoring of the transactional activity. So over the years, I've been thinking that maybe there should be a lowering of the KYC standards, but the trade-off would have to be higher surveillance and higher monitoring. But what you cannot have is high KYC and ultra-high monitoring and surveillance because you don't have privacy.
And then then it's more regulated, which we're trying to get away from, but at the same time, in a sense, be regulated so that it's proficient in a way that people feel comfortable.
Exactly, but another unintended consequence is that there is a KYC also keeps people out of the system, right? So it creates financial exclusion if the standards are too high. So if we want to create financial inclusion, a more dynamic economy, in a more varied and vibrant economy, we should probably lower the KYC standards or allow people to have access to services and the good things about financial access. But then we would have to trade it off for more surveillance. We would have to give up our own privacy so that we can be traced, that we are not doing something bad. So it's a very complex issue, and I hope that there's more conversations.
Yes, exactly. And hopefully we get to some sort of compromise that works and everyone's happy with that.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Juan.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Everyone be on the lookout for him, and thank you so much.